Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is a Ukraine War Update Extra video, giving you the extra information, tidbits and nuggets to get your teeth into concerning the war in Ukraine. Where should we start today? Well, actually, although I've done my frontline update this morning, there was a bit of a lack from one of my Russian sources, Rebar. They said some things on Telegram, but not lots elsewhere. And in fact, they've just come out with a bunch of information on Bakhmut on their Twitter account, or at least the English translation of their Twitter account. This is worth just talking about a little bit, having a look at their claims. Fighting continues on the outskirts of Bakhmut. The Wagnerites, together with the LNR militia, are conducting an offensive in several areas. Ukrainian command is sending reserves to retain control over the territory, so it's too early to talk about the liberation of Bakhmut. Well, yeah, I mean, goodness me, no one's talking about Bakhmut being liberated any day soon. But there does, I talked to you earlier today about there being pressure on Bakhmut in the northern area, particularly Solidar and Bakhmutska. So this is looking a bit troublesome for the Ukrainians. They've had success to the east, pushing back the Russians from the attack on the eastern suburbs, and down south in Opitny, although there are some claims on Rebar concerning that too. So Solidar is up here. They appear to have taken control over a school in Bakhmutska, and so on and so forth. So what the Rebar source continues to say is Wagner assault units pushed units of the 63rd Ukrainian Brigade from 5 platoon strongholds near Opitny on the Ivanhrad side. So that's interesting. I'll be very fascinated to see what the Ukrainians say about this going forward and tomorrow. So here's Ivanhrad. The Rebar source here is saying that 5 strongholds along this axis the Ukrainians have been pushed out of. Okay, we shall see. There is heavy fighting on the eastern outskirts of Klishchivka. Yeah, units of the AFU 28th Brigade are setting up minefields in the central part of the village. Just remind people of where Klishchivka is, because not everyone sits and looks at maps all day like me. Klishchivka is just to the southwest of Opitny and sits on a higher ground here. Or there's higher ground just behind Klishchivka. Goes down here, and the Russians are really trying to put pressure on Klishchivka because it could be a key towards unlocking the south here. They're struggling in Opitny. If they can encircle Bakhmut by taking Klishchivka, then that would work a lot in their favor. But the Ukrainians are mining the center of the village. Artillery crews of the AFU 28th, 57th, and 53rd Brigades are firing a barrage at the areas where Russian armed forces are advancing, and then lots of drone usage provide targeting as well. On the southeastern outskirts of Bakhmut, Russian forces are gradually pushing through the defense of the Ukrainian garrison. Reinforcements and 3 tanks have been transferred to the area from the AFU 57th Infantry Brigade to assist and replenish it. So to the southeast, again, that would indicate this area again. Here's the south, here's the east, southeast is kind of here. Well, that's got to be Opitny, really. So there's some more further down here. Here we are in the Solidar sector. So that's in the northeast. The Wagnerites continue to advance in several directions, systematically improving their positions. Currently, fighting is taking place in the vicinity of Razdolivka, Vesele, and on the eastern outskirts of Solidar from the direction of Bakhmutska. So let's go back up there, direction of Solidar from Bakhmutska. So that's attacking from there. Towards Solidar, and then attacking towards Vesele. That'll be from Yakovlivka. Yakovlivka is going to be a thorn in the side of the Ukrainians here. Definitely, you'd want a counterattack to take Yakovlivka back, really, and Solidar. This whole area is so important for the continued sustained defense of Bakhmut in general. So Rebar finishes off with units of the AFU 10th Mountain Assault Brigade and 46th Air Mobile Brigade are defending in nearly destroyed settlements. There are no serious fortifications. Holding the villages is complicated by artillery and aviation fire by Russian forces and problems with ammo supply. At the same time, assault groups of the 128th AFU Brigade attempted to break through the advancing ranks of the Russian armed forces in the area of Stryapivka. As a result of a counterattack by Russian servicemen, the AFU lost control over 4 positions. So just to let you know where they're talking about there, Stryapivka is a little hamlet just the other side of the road here in the Solidar area. It's around, yeah, there we go, Stryapivka. So in that area, there's fighting around there again. If the Russian lines are here, what does that kind of mean? Is there fighting back here? A little bit of confusion over how that works. Anyway, that I think is important to give you a sense of what's going on in Bakhmut. And then that leads me on to this, which is what I was originally going to talk about. So that's all, this has literally just come on 25 minutes ago onto Rebar. I wanted to talk about this, and I almost posted this yesterday. There's a video, not just this one, but another one in the bunker where Prigozhin, who's leader of the Wagner PMC, is shaking the hands of these Russian Wagnerites, but they are having a right old go at Gerasimov, leader of the Russian MOD, and basically not really happy with their lots. And someone's done a little bit of short analysis of what this means. So Bryn Tannehill here says there's a lot going on in the video that tends to reinforce some of the inferences OSINT, so open source intelligence types, have been making in the past few months. Let's break it down. So this is Russian mercenaries on video speaking with Prigozhin. Wagner mercenaries call Russian MOD's chief of staff, so that's Gerasimov, a piece of SH1T on camera. You are a piece of Where are the shells? We have no shells anymore here at Bakhmut. Prigozhin says he has nothing to say about this video, which is essentially endorsing the attack on Gerasimov. So fascinating. I've been saying for some time that there is a lack of artillery ammunition around here, and there's lots of reasons why that is. So in I think in this video as well, there was we're going to come on to that. So there's some information on this video that there is a lack of ammunition, but previously we have known that the Wagner have been saying don't keep any ammunition 100 kilometers away from the front line, or it has to be kept further away than 100 kilometers to keep it out of HIMARS range. They're getting hammered in terms of ammunition and depots and whatnot. But then not only that, they seem to have dropped the amount of barrages they are doing. The amount of shells they're firing each day has dropped significantly, so on and so forth. All this suggests, and we know that the sort of places that HIMARS have been sitting, HIMARS have been hitting, have been, really key targets, Alchevsk, near Luhansk, all sort of popping at places all around here, Shastia, taking out key, what one must imagine includes key targets, including ammunition. So then to return to this, what the video is purportedly of is some Russian Wagner artillerymen in the Bakhmut region complaining that they have no ammunition and repeatedly calling Chief of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces and First Deputy Minister of Defense Gerasimov a F word. Sharp eyes have noted that the manufacturing date on some of the Russian 152mm rounds was 2022. This also accompanies a slackening of artillery fire around Bakhmut, what I just said. There had been some speculation Russia was saving it up for an offensive, but if it's not being distributed forward, it's being held in larger concentrations in the rear, which is basically HIMARS bait if less than 80 kilometers behind the line, and makes sustained fire much harder if further back than that due to logistics. So in other words, if the artillery is kept further than 100 kilometers back here, then it's just a nightmare trying to get consistent deliveries of ammunition to the front line. If they are using 2022 artillery ammunition, then this is saying that they have run out of stocks that are older than that. They want to go through their older stocks before they start getting stuff that's just freshly been made, especially since some of the claims are that the stuff that's freshly been made is not as good quality as some of the older stocks. So this is really, really important. So it's also possible that the Russian army is withholding ammunition from Wagner and saving it for itself. There continues to be significant shelling, though less than the June-July peak, but this points at scarcity as well. I've not seen DPRK shells, so I think that's North Korea shells. What's also interesting is how this has got out. So this is a video that is effectively sanctioned by Prigozhin. He was recorded. He knew he was being recorded by people with phones, and he's allowed this to get out, which is to say that this is an endorsement of Prigozhin. And since it's slagging off Gerasimov, this is arguably Prigozhin positioning himself in a place where he is getting some leverage over Gerasimov, where he's perhaps lining himself up to be a replacement for Shoigu or Gerasimov or any of these people in the military echelons of command. We shall see. That's definitely tells us a lot, that video, those videos. So let's go on to what Alexei Arestovych says, who's a spokesperson for the Ukrainians. Here, translation of his daily sort of interview is being made by Ward Translated. So, talking of the Engels airfield, an accident at the Engels airfield in Russia, pilots killed. 10 aircraft flew to other bases. So this is fascinating stuff, and there are some claims actually. I'm sure I've got some claims elsewhere. Bear with me. It's actually further down the thread here. So, what he goes on to say about the Engels airfield. After the recent attack at the Engels airfield, 10 aircraft were transferred to an airbase in the Far East, 7 Tu-95 strategic bombers and 3 Tu-160s. So that's the bear bomb. Those are big old bombers. Approximately 8 to 10 aircraft out of 18 to 20 remain at Engels, but the mission control center is destroyed, which endangers future missions. According to the statement of the Russian Defense Ministry about the incident at the Engels military airfield, air defense systems shot down a Ukrainian drone at low altitude while approaching a military airfield in Engels. As a result of the fall of its wreckage, 3 servicemen were killed. Aircraft equipment was not damaged. So, end of that quote. So, 3 gross lies in their statement: low altitude, personnel killed by wreckage, and no damage. The Russian air defense again demonstrated incapacity to protect its strategic airfield. The irony is that this happened on the eve of the Day of Air Defense of Russia. And in fact, there are other claims that some of the Russian craft were either damaged or outright taken out. So it will be interesting to see, as satellite imagery will no doubt come out to show us at least partially the extent of the damage that was done to the airfield, whether that was a more useful strike than the Russians are saying. This is kind of what happened last time Engels was here, and another airbase. The claims that the Russians made were that there was very little damage at all, and then further Ukrainian claims came out saying actually we think a number of aircraft were taken out there. So we shall see. Again, lots of talk about all sorts of stuff. Just to say about Kremlin, despite rumored Ukrainian advances, there are no visible signs, although Russian sources claim the front line moved closer to Kremlin. So, again, that's a place that we're really looking out for over the next few days, because there have been lots of pro-Ukrainian sources making big claims about that. Just to talk about there's a couple more bits I wanted to say. Yeah, so the Patriot and the Patriot, it appears, at least from another source I was looking at, that they actually won't be on the battlefield anytime soon, as in particularly soon. American Patriot air defense systems will appear on the battlefield in Ukraine sooner than the Russian propaganda thinks is possible. So quite often when you hear about some of these things being given to Ukraine, you think, oh, it's going to be on the battlefield next week, or it's going to be delivered, or because quite often it is true that they've already been delivered, and the announcements are actually sort of post hoc or after the fact announcements saying, oh, we are going to give this, or we are giving this, when actually it's already there. But in the case of the Patriot, that appears not to be true. And the question is, well, actually, how long will it take for A, people to be trained up on Patriot, and B, for it to be delivered to the front line? So yeah. And finally, with that, and this is a big one, a massive missile attack on Ukraine was scheduled for December the 26th. So that was yesterday, and that was what I intimated earlier, did not occur after the flight control center was damaged and the entire duty shift was destroyed, according to rumors at least. Now, I was saying that the last time Engels was hit, the next day was the big saturation bombing attack. And so I was saying that it could well be that the Ukrainians knew that a big bombing attack was going to take place yesterday, and so therefore did a preemptive strike on Engels, and that would fit in with what they did previously. well, lo and behold, that appears to be at least what the Ukrainian intelligence is saying. And there have been, this has been, if not confirmed, at least validated by the fact that there are a load of naval vessels and submarines actively out on the Black Sea, and they all have cruise missile capability. Actually, as I speak, I think there are air raid sirens going across Ukraine now, and there's been some talk of certain bombers taking to the air from a few airfields in Russia, as according to certain open source intelligence sources. So it literally could happen today, could happen anytime too soon, but I expect a large scale attack to happen fairly soon, if not, who knows, today. Okay, moving on to something different. Over to the general events, says Noel reports the European Commission transferred 66 million euros to Ukraine for the reconstruction of schools destroyed and damaged by Russia. This was announced by Katerina Matanova, Deputy Director General of the EC Directorate General for Neighbourhood Policy. And actually, this goes back to what an initial announcement was that EU and Ukraine signed 100 million euros a deal for the rehabilitation of war-damaged schools. This is to so the European Commission has allocated around 14 million euros from an ongoing contract with a Polish bank to purchase school buses and bring Ukrainian children safely to school. The Commission also launched a EU-wide solidarity campaign to donate school buses for Ukraine, channeled through the EU Civil Protection Mechanism. Overall, around 240 buses are now on the way to the EU and its member states. More are coming. And von der Leyen, the European Commission president, said Russia's targeted attacks against civilian infrastructure, especially as winter grips a country, are a deliberate crime against millions of innocent people, and they are a gross violation of international law. The EU's top priority is to bring back as soon as possible Ukrainian children to school. Today, we are delivering on our promise to support the rehabilitation of schools damaged and destroyed by Russia's brutal war. And by early 2023, we will also deliver school buses to Ukraine so children can actually travel to school in the best possible conditions. The future of Ukraine begins with its children back in schools. I can't agree with this more. And the strain on the education system has been huge. And in fact, this also represents a real threat to the psychological well-being of children. I mean, also the teachers and not everyone involved in education, but actually the children need school, they need routine, they need support, they need nurturing. And if they're hiding in basements or if they're at home without the necessary equipment and devices to access the internet, and without Wi-Fi coverage, to get onto sort of educational websites or their own school setup, then they are missing out, and you're going to have a generation of children or cohorts of children that are just going to be missing out on key skills from a protracted war that is really damaging the nation in so many different ways. This will then affect, um, the competitive viability uh, of humans with skills as these advance through education. If this continues to go on in the way it is, and that will then affect the economic outlook for Ukraine, and then so on and so forth. But at the moment, it really is about psychological well-being, I would say, and that's a massive, massive challenge. And so anyway, this article just details a whole load of extra things that EU are doing. So I'm going to just give the EU some props here. Now, the useful thing, and I know there's going to be people who are Brexiteers and pro-Brexit, but this is not about UK. This is about the EU and Ukraine. Okay, so one really useful thing about the EU is its ability to bring together a whole load of experts from all different nations within it, under its umbrella, to do strategic planning and to work out what the best course of action is, and be able to put in a whole ton of resources into achieving that in a really macro strategic sense, in a way that perhaps maybe America is so big, but someone like, say, the UK on its own unilaterally would struggle to do. It takes a kind of overarching organization with that macro vision and the ability to accumulate resources like the EU to be able to really effectively do things like this. And so this aid that the EU is giving to regenerating the education system in Ukraine is massively important and is probably something that is better suited to an organization like the EU than a single nation. And I think that this is good and is reflective. The EU needs to play to its strengths, and the UK has its strengths. Let's train up soldiers. Let's give them these pieces of equipment. But when it comes to this kind of policy, I think that plays better from an organisation like the EU. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. This is terrible. So in Russia, an elderly woman was kicked out literally from a bus for criticising the war Russia wages against Ukraine. And again, as ever, I will read out the subtitles to this because I know a lot of people listen to this as an audio podcast type thing. Anyway, so here's this older woman sitting on a bus talking about how the war isn't great, and then goodness me, she gets literally picked up and thrown off the bus. It's terrible. So here's a translation. Television is a great power. Go to your Ukraine and live there, says someone else. Then she says, I've only been there twice in my youth. I have no relations. I don't even have acquaintances there. No problem. Go now and help them, says someone else. You go where you're saying to go, with those who went to fight with rubber boots, tanks, hatchets. Everything is stolen, she says. And then something unintelligible about stealing. Listen, it's a different matter if not everything in the army is right. Someone else says, no, it's an important matter. You're a ho-ho, a banderite, they say, which is, insulting her for being like Ukrainian, basically. She says, it's an empire on stools. She's a real ho-ho from Ukraine, says someone else, and there's some laughing. You're laughing, it's happening because of people like you. And then she's forcibly picked up, this old woman, by some bloke, and then everyone else is sort of watching, and there she is, thrown out of a bus. Good old freedom of speech. It's just terrible. Like, that upsets me quite a lot. That you could do that you could, like, this person. I mean, so the question I always, or what I always try to do is put myself in the head of other people, right? So what would it take for me to act like this man? For me to act like this man, I think it says a bunch of things. It says, obviously, stuff like state propaganda. I mean, he could be some undercover guy, could be whatever, or he could be just some random is really taking offense to what she says. So if he's taking offense to what she says, he's been living on a diet of sort of fascist, Putin-esque media and information. But then, if you're really, again, still, why would you act like that? If you're really confident in your position, so if I was really, really confident that Russia were entirely correct and Ukraine were entirely wrong, I wouldn't feel threatened to throw someone off a bus, right? I would sit there and maybe laugh at them, say, and actually just show that they're utterly wrong, right? And just sit there and but maybe that's me as a philosopher and someone interested in sort of intellectual pursuits. But still, like, I think for him to do that is a feeling that he's threatened. So I'm doing some armchair psychoanalysis here. And for him to feel like he's threatened, there has to be some element that she's actually right. I think the most cohesive kind of understanding of what's going on here is when someone hits a sore point, you react much more vigorously. And if there's a feeling that, yeah, you're right, things aren't going, everyone must know that the war isn't going like swimmingly, right? Everyone must have some idea of that. Here's someone pointing it out and saying, speaking truths, spitting fire, and he's reacting in that way, I think says more about his lack of confidence in the Russian narrative. And his best way of dealing with that is to throw this person out. So this is effectively the same as sticking your fingers in your ears. It's like, I don't want to hear, I don't want to hear, I don't want to hear. So I'm not hearing. In this case, I don't want to hear, I don't want to hear. But in order to not hear, I'm just going to eject you from the bus. And this will kind of, because he will be going through something called cognitive dissonance, which is where you have two. So cognitive dissonance is hugely prevalent. I've talked about this before for all humans. So you have a core belief. The core belief, we really like to retain our core beliefs. We hate it. We're not very good at changing our minds. So generally that we'll have loads of biases and loads of mental heuristics, loads of mechanisms in our mind that will retain the primacy of our core belief, which is Russia's amazing, right? And you've got some evidence against that. So you've got this old woman spouting stuff on the bus, right? Now that produces disharmony in your brain because you're like, I've got this core belief that Russia's amazing. She's saying that Russia's rubbish and the war is not going well and blah, blah, blah. So I cannot live with disharmony. So this is cognitive dissonance. I can't live with dissonance. So we have something called cognitive dissonance reduction. So cognitive dissonance reduction is what your brain does to somehow harmonize these things. So what you can do is you can harmonize the evidence that you are given against your position to fit with your position, right? That's just not possible in this situation. There isn't any tinkering with the evidence. Someone's just like saying stuff that's directly against your core beliefs. So there are other ways. The other thing you can do is change your core belief, right? And take on this new evidence, and that becomes your new core belief. That's really rare that happens. People are so bad at going, oh, do you know what I was wrong? This is Putin. Putin's, sunk cost fallacy. Putin's never going to go, oh, do you know what I was wrong? This is bad. This is okay. Let's pull out. The best thing to do is pull out. It's never going to happen. So what people do is they reject out of hand this contrary evidence. So, you might talk about, I've had this argument with creationists who believe the world is only 6,000 years old. You present all the evidence and they'll say, yeah, the devil planted that evidence, or they bury their heads in the sand and just don't, whatever. They reject that evidence out of hand, right? Now, in this situation, the rejecting the evidence out of hand is literally throwing this woman off the bus, and then you have your core belief. Anyway, that's just a bit of psychoanalysis. But the question is always, why do people act like this? What, rather than just get really annoyed with this guy for doing horrible stuff, which I do as well in my head, I'm annoyed with him and I think it's disgusting. It's more useful to go, well, how did that happen? How do we understand him? And then how do you change that? So going forward, like, this war will end somehow. Going forward, there's going to be millions of Russians who will feel like Putin. How do you solve that over the next 5 years, 10 years? There's a awful lot of fascistic feeling going on in the general population in Russia. That's a really big problem to solve, and it won't be solved easily. So there, and that kind of video sparks off all that kind of thought in me. Sorry if I've been banging on. Let's go and talk about something else. Failed Russian assault in the Andrivka is not Andrivka. This is actually Avdivka. It's not the first time people have made this mistake. There's lots of other sources saying it's definitely Avdivka. Andrivka is a tiny village unnamed on the Google Maps in and around Bakhmut. Just to let you know, it's around here. So Andrivka, that some people are mentioning very often, gets mentioned, is this little settlement near, just down south of Klishivka. Here it is. So that's Andrivka. Right, it's not even named on Google Maps, but that is Andrivka. So it's unlikely you're going to have you could do a big sort of bunch of armored vehicles and drone warfare and all sorts going on there. Possibly more likely it's in the vicinity of Avdivka, which is this big battle site going on around this sort of satellite town outside of Donetsk. Anyway, that's all by the by. Notice the work of the new Ukrainian kamikaze drone. This is fascinating stuff here. During this assault, Russian losses were 7 BMPs, so these infantry fighting vehicles. 7 of them get taken out and destroyed, and 3 more damaged. Ukraine weapons tracker says, actually, we have here Stugner P, which are these two-man ATGMs I told you about before, the anti-tank guns, one with a controller that's 30 to 50 meters away from the actual firing mechanism, and that fires, and they look at it on a screen, and there's infrared going on, and they hit the target. Whereas a javelin is a one-person job, put it on your shoulder, fire it off, and that goes and hits. Anyway, you've got both of those, but you've also got drones, which look, and these are significant loitering piece of munition. They are they make some big bangs. The question is, what are they? Now, it could be Phoenix Ghosts. We've heard about being given from America. It could be Switchblade 600s. However, at least a couple of these look like they're quadcopters, which are drones with four sets of rotor blades on them to give you greater power and stability. Now, if they are quadcopters, then they are probably commercial off-the-shelf drones that have been adapted to have some significant like piece of munition on there, ordnance on there to blow up as it has. Anyway, let's have a look. So here we have just your usual sort of spliced together bunch of stuff of things getting blown up, lots of smoke. There we go. So there were two vehicles hit there. The resolution is very poor, unfortunately. But you get the idea that there's some serious damage being done, big explosions. So they look like so previously they look like your javelins and Stugners perhaps. Now you can see some, the side of this imagery, there is rotating rotor blades. So these look like they're quadcopters, therefore very unlikely to be Phoenix Ghosts or Switchblade 600s. Bang. And another BMP. Bang. And again, you can see the rotor blades. Bang. Now, from another angle, you can see how significant these explosions are as it comes in. You can see it. Bang. That is a big explosion, right? There is some serious ordnance on that. Again, you've got the rotor blades there. And, hits that BMP from the side. Now, this is one that we've seen a few sort of images, snapshots taken of this, screenshots taken of this, because this is a BMP with open back doors, and it looks like it doesn't quite go in the open back door. There's someone on top, and it just sort of hits the frame just above that door. But do you know what? Don't drive along when you've got loitering munitions with your back doors open. You got someone on top, and then bang. But the back doors are open. That's going to be it's going to be a bit of a nasty shock for everyone there. And here you have what could well be javelin here, and bang. That is one big explosion. And in fact, there are several vehicles there. There are 3 vehicles there. Another one nearby, another one over here. Just so the Amiga, I think they're a sort of special forces group. That is some pretty big damage being done around Avdiivka, it seems. It's Avdiivka anyway. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is in Ukraine, a property of Russian oligarch Alisher Usmanov to the amount of 2 billion Ukrainian, I don't want to pronounce their currency, was seized. Underground Russian warehouses were found where more than 160,000 tons of Ukrainian iron ore was stored. So Interfax Ukraine talks about this story. Clandestine warehouses with more than 160,000 tons of Ukrainian iron ore belonging to the company of Russian oligarch Alisher Usmanov have been discovered on the territory of several seaports of Ukraine. The property has been seized. The State Security Service of Ukraine, SBU, so that's the equivalent of the FSB, has said. The Security Service continues to identify and block the assets of representatives of pro-Kremlin corporations involved in financing the war against Ukraine. As a result of investigative and operational actions, together with the Economic Security Bureau, detectives, the location of the underground warehouses of Russia, where more than 160,000 tons of Ukrainian iron ore was stored, the SBU said in a Telegram channel on Tuesday. So according to the SBU, iron ore was discovered on the territory of several seaports in Ukraine to the value of total value of the seized minerals is about 2 billion Ukrainian. So this is really important. This is exactly the sort of thing they want to do now, because the iron ore appears to be stolen from them anyway. So A, reclaim that, and B, seize all the assets of this guy. Now the Americans have just, in the US, the Congress has just agreed, and I think this is a Republican amendment, which is really good. However, I'm not sure the workability of it, which is to, as part of the recent sort of package of I think it's part of the Omni package that just came out in Congress, where they're giving a load of assistance to Ukraine. They have agreed to seize, when they seize all these sanctioned oligarchs' stuff, off these Russians, to then kind of sell that off, and all the proceeds go to rebuilding Ukraine. Right, which is absolutely brilliant. I totally agree with this 100%. But I have heard some discussion about actually how easy it is to do that. I know Ukraine, the latest, were talking about this. So the British haven't been doing this, and the reason that our government is given for not doing this is that it's really difficult to do. So when you seize, so say you've got a yacht, a house, a bunch of stuff for a Russian oligarch, and you seize it all, you have to go through loads of legal sort of what's its. And in all that time that you're doing that, in case it all goes wrong, that has to be looked after. So the property, the yacht, all this stuff has to be looked after by the government, which then costs money to maintain it. It has to be maintained to the level it was, because if then there's some kind of legal challenge and it all falls through, then you're liable for any kind of loss of whatever. So you have to look after all this, and then you've got to try and sell it, and then all this, it's just a really difficult process. And it's not like you've got this stuff that's worth $10 billion and then suddenly that means you've got $10 billion. Not at all. It means that here's $10 billion worth of assets. Somehow you've got to turn that into liquid cash. Somehow the government has, the question is, well, like, if I was a billionaire, right, an American billionaire, I'm thinking, oh, I'm in the market for a big super yacht. And the government says to me, oh, do you want this super yacht? It's Russian. We'll give it to you at a knockdown price. I'll be thinking, yeah, that sounds brilliant. Like, on paper, that's great. But after this war is over, are the FSB going to be after me? Is that Russian oligarch going to be like sending hitmen onto my boat? Like, what, am I safe taking on a Russian boat? So I think these will be sort of poison chalices. I'd be interested to see how easy it is that these things get turned into hard cash, that you can then say, okay, Ukraine, here's a hard cash. There you go. Unless you just, I don't know, give the boats to Ukraine, but what are they going to do with the super yachts, and how are you going to get that, in the Black Sea? I don't know, and the property, and so it is really difficult. But in principle, what the Americans done, absolutely 100% agree with that, which is this is all the confiscated stuff from sanctioned Russian entities, and we're going to turn that into cash and give all that cash to Ukraine. Brilliant, love that. Just I wish it would be easier than it looks like it's going to be. And the Ukraine latest podcast said, we'd be interested in finding out from experts, like, how easy it is, because the British have said this is too difficult to do, so we're not doing that. Whereas the Americans say, yeah, we are doing that. So how are you going to do that? If you guys have some, if anyone has some expertise on that kind of thing, put it in the threads below, and let me know. Anyway, there you go. I've spoken for far too long, almost 40 minutes now. That is my Ukraine War Update Extra. Please like, subscribe, share, all those usual things. You can pop along to uasupporter.com/ATP if you buy anything from them. That's reporting from Ukraine's sort of little shop. Then I get a little bit of commission, so that would be fantastic. You could buy a keychain. Hey, everyone needs a keychain that says "Stop Putin" or "Slava Ukraini" or "Stop the War." Any of those, or one with a bottle opener, which I think that is, or it's a stand or something. I don't know. Stand with Ukraine keychain. I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. And Also, you can pop along to get any of my books. For example, you can get my philosophy books that may be of interest to you. There's about 12 of them there. Look for Jonathan M.S. Pearce. But if you put in Johnny Pearce, you can find my non-fiction books that are of a sort of gentler persuasion. Twins, A Survival Guide for Dads. The family book of word of the day for a year, for every year forever. Or you can look at my fiction for young adults and kids, Curse of the Maya, A True Seeker Story. That's the first of a series of 2 at the moment. There will be 3. And same for Survival of the Fittest. First one is Metamorphosis, second is Adaptation. So you can check my books out there under Johnny Pearce. Or Jonathan M.S. Pearce if you like geeky stuff. Anyway, thank you for your support. Toodle pips. I'll catch up with you tomorrow.